It's Alexis Hasselberger, time management and productivity coach. Today, I want to talk about something that has been just coming up a lot in my sessions with clients, and it is delegation, right? We know we should be doing it more. We're not doing it enough. We're taking on too much for ourselves, but delegation is hard and it's scary. And so we procrastinate on that a little bit. Before I get too far, I also want to just mention that this video is sponsored by MyTasker, which is a VA company, a virtual assistant company that helps us to delegate. So it is very timely for this topic, but I'll get to a little bit more about that later. So let's talk delegation. Why don't we do it, right? We know we should, but why don't we do it? So I think there are three primary reasons that people don't delegate. This is what I see. I see that we don't delegate because we think we can do it better and faster ourselves, right? And maybe we can until we train someone, right? We also don't delegate, or we hesitate to delegate because we don't want to overburden people. And that's coming from a really good place, right? Like, we think we have a lot of work on our plate. They have a lot of work on our plate. We don't want to force more work onto somebody else's plate. So we don't delegate. Another reason we might not delegate is because we don't feel like we have anyone to delegate to, right? We look around, we're not a manager, we don't have direct reports, and we think, like, who could I possibly delegate anything to? I'm just stuck dealing with it all myself. So today, in today's video, I want to talk about a couple of things. First, I want to talk about who can we delegate to, right? Even if we feel like we have no one to delegate to. I also want to talk about how we delegate, because I think that sometimes the fear of delegating comes from the fact that we're not exactly sure where to get started or how to do it. But first, let's just dive a little bit deeper into these reasons, right? So we think we can do it better and faster ourselves. We can right now because we haven't trained anybody else to do it. That is 100% true. However, if we keep doing these things, we're just going to keep sucking that time away from ourselves. And the reality is that usually, if you put in a little bit of upfront work, someone else is going to be able to do that not only as good as you, but maybe even better in the long run. And so we think about this in terms of kind of short-term pain versus long-term pain, or at least that's how I think about it. If I can spend a little bit of time upfront right now delegating something to someone, and maybe we go through some iterations until they get it right? Because, we are going to be better at the beginning and we can train them to get there. Then they are going to be able to take this thing off of our plate forever. So we don't need to think about it anymore. So it often feels like, oh, I don't have time to train someone, but do you have time to do this thing every week for the rest of your life, right? That's how I would think about it. The not wanting to overburden our teams, like, that's a big one, right? We know we are all too overworked, right? Like, we all have too much to do. And so we want to make sure that we're not burdening other people. Oftentimes people view any kind of delegation, not any kind, but people view delegation oftentimes as a gift, right? Because we think we're delegating something that we don't want to do. And often the people to whom we're delegating, that is actually something that maybe they have been wanting to do or wanting to try or wanting to have experience in. I remember I had a client one time and he was very hesitant to delegate, but he had a conference coming up that he was supposed to be speaking on. He was supposed to be giving some sort of a tech talk, and he just did not have time to make it happen. And so he ended up having to delegate it to one of his direct reports. And he felt really, really bad about it. He felt like he was just dumping work on this person. Now this person's going to have to travel. They're going to have to, write a speech. They're going to have to do all of this stuff. He was feeling really bad, but he did it anyways because he knew he couldn't handle it with his workload. What happened was that guy came back from the conference, the guy he had delegated to, and he went into my client's office and he said, "Hey, you know what? I just really want to thank you for this opportunity. I have been wanting to speak at a conference for a long time. I didn't know when I would get a chance. And so I really just want to say thank you." My client was flabbergasted, right? He thought he was doing something bad, right? He thought he was delegating this thing and it was dumping work. What really was happening was he was giving somebody an opportunity that person had actually been looking for. So I would encourage you to just think about this. It won't happen every single time that it'll be such a great example, but oftentimes the things that we just feel like, oh, we could do this, we know it like the back of our hand. It's something that somebody else wants to learn. Right. And then the last one of, I don't have anyone to delegate to. We often view the word delegate as if it's, it's this one-way thing, right? You can only delegate to somebody who's like below you in the organization, et cetera. And I think we want to expand that word, that definition. So what does delegate mean? I think about delegate as just sharing the load, right? So if we're thinking about home, we might be able to delegate to our kids. My kids will not be happy if they see this, and one of them will because he's going to edit it. But we can delegate to our kids, and this is helpful to them because they are going to need these skills when they become adults, right? In the workplace, if we have direct reports, 100% we can delegate to them. But sometimes we are also able to delegate to peers or even to, sometimes our boss, right? We are able to think of this as who is the best person to be doing this type of work, right? So it's not always just the people that we think of as, hey, our direct reports are the people that we can delegate to. Another type of person that you can delegate to is an outsourced resource, right? And when I get into talking about this video's sponsor, My Tasker, that is a way to delegate to a kind of external resource, to a virtual assistant or somebody else that's maybe not a resource you have right now, but is a resource that you could have later, right? It's a resource that you might have access to and maybe much less expensive than you actually think. Another way to think about delegating, I think sometimes of bartering, like could we barter services with other people? So it's not exactly delegating, but maybe you can, get something back in return that feels a lot better to you. So, maybe you have a friend who is really fantastic at organizing closets, right? And you were really terrible at that. And so maybe you could exchange with them. You could delegate the organization of your closet, which feels like a horrible task to you. And maybe you're really, really good at budgeting or something. And so you can help them set up a budget. So there are lots of ways to think about getting work off of our own plate if it isn't the right work for us or if we have too much work there. All right. So when we think about delegation, I want to think about the way that we actually do it, because that can be a scary part too. Once we've decided to delegate, great. It's not like everything's over, right? We actually need to then delegate, and we need to do it in a way that feels good to everyone, in a way that doesn't feel like it is just dumping work. And so I have 6 steps that we can use to delegate in a way that feels good to everyone. Now, the first step is to ask, don't demand, right? Even if you are in a position of power over someone, even if someone is your direct report, or maybe there's someone that you've hired, a virtual assistant or something like that, we always want to ask, not demand. Why? Because it's nicer and it feels better to everybody, right? Like if your boss comes up to you and says, hey, I need you to do, X by Thursday. I mean, you're going to do it, right? But it doesn't feel that great. What if your boss comes up to you and says, hey, I would really love your help with Project X. I think you'd be really good at it because of Y. Is this something that you have the bandwidth for? Doesn't that feel better? Doesn't that feel better? It's not like dumping work. It's like a conversation. It's collaboration. So we, as the delegators, can do that, right? We can make things feel good for other people. Now, the next thing that you want to do, the second step, is you want to set really clear expectations, right? So one thing that comes up a lot with my clients is they say, well, I tried to delegate, but it just comes back to me. It's not what I wanted. And then I have to redo the work all by myself, right? And that feels like a waste of everyone's time. It probably feels really demoralizing for the person who was delegated to, right? Because they're sending back their work and the other person's saying, it's not good enough and I need to fix it on my own. Or they're probably not saying that directly, but that's what's kind of happening. And so we want to set really clear expectations, specifically about the what of what we're asking, right? The how, we can leave that to the people who are doing it. We don't need to micromanage that. But we want to be really specific about what the end product is that we're looking for, what the timeline is that we're looking for, so that everybody knows what can be expected. This makes things go so much more smoothly. Now, the next thing that we want to do is to confirm understanding, right? So just because we think we've been clear, that doesn't mean that the other person totally understood what we were saying. And so I find a helpful way is just to ask, okay, is that clear? Do you have any questions around this? Hey, maybe you could repeat back to me what I'm asking just to make sure we're on the same page. A lot of different ways to make sure that we are on the same page and that this person is not going to go do a bunch of work that ends up being a waste of everybody's time, right? We want to make sure they know what's being asked and that they're able to kind of regurgitate that back in a way that feels good to everyone. The next thing that you want to do is to trust but verify. Right? Of course, you're giving this to somebody who you think is going to do a great job at it. But when we delegate, it's not fully off our plate until it's done. Right? So this means maybe you just establish some check-ins with someone. Maybe you leave it on your task list and the next action for you is to follow up with that person, but it's not really off your plate until it's really, really done, really off your plate. Now, another thing that we can do is avoid last minute delegation. This is the kind of delegation that really is dumping work. It's not very nice. It doesn't feel good for anyone. I think we all know what this feels like when, somebody comes over to us and they're like, hey, I need you to do this thing and it's due in an hour. And you're thinking like, I have other stuff that I'm doing right now, right? What? This is not helpful. And so we really want to avoid delegating at the last minute. And this sounds obvious, but it's not actually what happens a lot of time because we have this internal resistance to delegating. We often wait until it's like clear that there's absolutely no way that we are going to be able to get it done ourselves before we delegate. And then we're delegating the last minute. Now it's a fire drill for everyone. And that really doesn't feel good, right? We don't want to delegate in such a way that our report or whoever it is that we're delegating to is having to rush around and do something at the last minute. And then the final step, the sixth step for delegation is to say thank you, right? When somebody does something for you, even if they work for you, even if you're paying them, even if we still always want to say thank you because it feels good and it's nice, right? Somebody has done something for us. No matter if that's their job, we still want to say thank you. That makes the delegation process so much better for everyone. All right, so we have talked a lot about delegation today, why we don't do it, why we should do it, how we should do it. And I want to come back to MyTasker, who is sponsoring this video right now. So MyTasker is a service that has VAs, right? So VAs are virtual assistants. And this is a way to have, an assistant, somebody that you can delegate to that is much more cost effective, right? So typically, and this is the case for MyTasker too, they're based in India. And so you're able to be able to delegate things to people who are with the currency triage, right? It seems less expensive to us, but those people are receiving a fair wage as well. And so a VA service like MyTasker, they offer things like administrative assistance and marketing assistance and IT assistance. And I think even maybe some accounting services and things like that. So there's a lot of different, small type tasks that you could offload or processes that you could offload to somebody else. Now, I don't use MyTasker. I use a different VA service and I use a different one because I've been using them for a long time. And when MyTasker reached out to me, I was already using a different service. However, I think that VA services, just the idea of a VA service is something that maybe isn't in a lot of people's minds, right? Or isn't something that you think, oh, I could do that, right? And so I just want to bring this up, VA services in general, and also specifically MyTasker as they are sponsoring this video, as an option for being able to delegate when you don't think you have anyone to delegate to. So I will drop their link down below in the description, and you could check it out if you like. I do really like having a VA myself, and the reason that I like this is because I am able to offload the pieces of my business or the pieces of my life that need to get done, but I have a clear process for, so somebody else could do it for me, right? This is not like the big heavy thinking work that I need to do in my own life or in my own business. It is the things like, reposting my blog posts in a number of different places, or responding to certain types of emails and things like this that can be really heavily processized so that somebody else can do it for you. So regardless of whether you think you don't have anyone to delegate to, maybe this video has sparked something for you and the people that you already have around you. Maybe you are interested in checking out a VA service like MyTasker, or maybe you're just going to feel a little bit more confident after today about how to delegate to your staff already, right? Or maybe to your kids, right? Same things apply there. So if you want more content like this, or if you want to know anything more about delegation, just drop a comment below and make sure to subscribe.
Yeah, make sure to check out our friends over at MyTasker and also hit the subscribe button. As you can see, only a small percent of the people that watch our videos are actually subscribed, so it'd be a big help if you did.